we'll probably have to do that at the end of the show too.
Everybody be careful. I see there's a notification that we're live on YouTube at this point.
Ooh.
Yes, so it does let you know. So
Hi, Mom. Okay.
all right. Oh, I can hear myself. Hold on 1 second.
Did you post this to show to? Blah, blah, blah. Did you post this to social media yet?
I'm posting it right now.
Word.
So I do that. All right, all. It is up.
Is it on yours or is it on the predominantly orange?
Looks like
It
it's
is.
high.
It's on mine. I just want to make sure I've got it here. Yep, there it goes. All right. So, Broncos country, welcome to the predominantly orange first round mock draft. We are very excited to have you here this evening as we decided to go live for the first time ever. We have a wonderful group of individuals here that will be helping out pick all 32 picks of the very first round. How's it going, guys?
Living and breathing right now, I guess. Just kind of holding steady.
All right. So, with that said, I think we should get started right away with the Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock. So, yes, boo the commissioner, boo the commissioner.
Boo!
All right. So, before the Bengals make their first pick, what are your guys' thoughts on what the Broncos are going to do with their first round pick?
Going
Easy,
out
not
on a
everybody
limb,
talk at once.
Awkward.
going out
silence
on a
there.
limb and picking wide receiver.
I'm jumping on that bandwagon too.
I think it's fair that everyone's going that route.
I think we're trading back and we're going to get a safety.
Oh,
Or a defensive kind of do everything player. Maybe that's a better way to describe him.
Maddie, that's the first I've heard someone wants a safety in the first round. I like it.
I think Chin might be that dude. And I think we might get him in the 20s and get more capital and then take a receiver in the second round. Just a hunch. I don't know.
I think for my sake, I think I'm probably on the wide receiver train. I think that there's probably a little bit too much smoke right now. Granted, we just don't know who we're going to take at this point and what wide receiver we like, although there's probably mixed reviews on who we like and everything with the top three. And now that Jefferson's entered the mix. So I'd say it's probably a mixed bag as far as, but lately it's been Judy. And considering the mock draft that happened yesterday, and it's been on record, I will go out and say that Jerry Judy will be the pick, whether it's at 15 or we trade up.
Judy time?
Judy time.
I'm just, as long as we don't take any Nebraska players.
Don't worry, there aren't really a lot in this draft to worry about. So,
that's kind of why I wanted to wear the Nebraska jersey. So that I can at least rep all these players, so that if they didn't get drafted, I can at least.
All right, guys. I think the pick is in, and let's see who it is. I will be selecting for the Cincinnati Bengals. And with the first pick of the 2020 NFL Draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select Joe Burrow, quarterback from LSU.
What? That's a curveball.
Right off the bat.
I know, right? Not for me, not much of a surprise. It's basically Andy Dalton hasn't led the Bengals to the postseason in 5 years. I think the Bengals are going to look for a fresh start, basically. And Joe Burrow, with all that he did last year, will give the Bengals that.
I like the pick. I'll pose a question because it was something we asked yesterday. Do you guys think that they hold on to Dalton with everything that's going on, especially if they do go Burrow?
I'd say no.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to be traded at. I'll be surprised they hold on to him, but I project that they'll probably trade him at some point in the draft, especially if they do go with this Burrow pick.
There got to be two sides to a trade, though. Somebody's got to want him, right?
Right.
So
Patriots.
Ash wouldn't get that pick. All right. So now with the Burrow pick in, we now move on to number 2 with the Washington Redskins.
ooh.
So do I just say that I have my pick in when I have my pick in?
Yes.
I was wondering the same thing. Like, how do I do this when I actually have my pick? Thank you.
Okay. The pick is in with the second overall pick. The Washington Redskins will select Chase Young from Ohio State. I think he would be he would be a good addition to anybody. He would be. I was thinking going quarterback for him, but I think they're going to play it safe and take best available. So I think they go with Chase Young.
It seems like a safe pick. And seems like he's a quintessential best player in the draft and once in a generation type player, and like the players before him with Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa, and hard to go wrong there.
That defensive line's gonna be nasty with Montez Sweat too, and Deron Payne.
Yeah, Ryan
man.
Sheridan.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think we have a trade at pick 3. Do you want to announce that?
Yeah. So earlier today, a trade was made between the Detroit Lions and the Miami Dolphins. So what happens is that the Dolphins send their 5th overall pick and their 2nd round pick, 39th overall, in exchange to move up 2 spots to number 3 with the Lions.
So with the 3rd overall pick, Dolphins will select Tua Tagovailoa.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, no, not gonna happen. They missed out on Drew Brees in 2006, and they're not gonna do that again with an injured quarterback. So that's my take.
I think he's easily the best quarterback on the board, but I think it would be silly for them to not try and draft up and get him.
Right.
I think you could even argue with his injuries, he may have the best resume of any quarterback in this draft. You know, Burrow has just 1 year at LSU, and Tua played through injury, and he played at a Heisman level through injury, which is crazy. He was the best player in college football 2 years ago, playing through nagging hamstring and all those injuries that he was dealing with. So for my money, he's a combo, left-handed combo, Russell Wilson, Drew Brees. I mean, he's awesome. So I think he's worth the trade up, but it'll be interesting to see if the Dolphins do what you just did, Graham, because I think obviously that's been rumored for a long time, but they seem to kind of be playing mind tricks with people. Nobody knows. Do they really like Justin Herbert enough to pass on Tua? Are they really going to give a high 2nd rounder to go up and get him with the injury history? I think that he's the guy that they want the most, and I think that they're putting all this stuff out there to show that they don't necessarily need to move up, but in the end, you know, some other team, the threat of some other team, that's all it takes. So I like the trade and I like the pick.
Yeah, and I think for Miami, Miami has a ridiculous amount of draft ammunition this year. So I think that they can probably outbid the Chargers if the Chargers wanted to move up too, because that's been rumored too for quarterback.
That was actually my plan. Like that's why I did that, so the Chargers wouldn't get him.
Yeah.
I love it. So with the fourth pick of the 2020 NFL draft, the New York Giants are selecting Isaiah Simmons. And the reason for this is I know there have been a lot of rumors for tackles. Makes sense. They definitely need a tackle. They should get a tackle. That would be the right decision for them is to get a tackle. But Dave Gettleman has never traded back in the first round. He also loves his trench players. A lot of his first round picks have been either defensive linemen or linebackers. As a team, Joe Judge, as their head coach, has that New England Patriots background, probably likes some versatility. They need linebackers. They need a little bit of secondary help. And Isaiah Simmons can literally fill all those positions if they use him in the correct way. I think he is rumored to go there, and he's probably the pick.
I think that's a really good pick. I wasn't completely expecting it, but I do think that he will fit in with the Giants really well.
I think with the Giants, and with Gettleman, he loves defensive players. He loves defensive players, and I would say that if it's not Isaiah Simmons, then they'll probably go offensive line. I know that there's recent buzz with a few
Tristan
offensive
Wirfs.
linemen that they've been going after. So yeah, so I just think it's probably, I would say, Isaiah Simmons or an offensive lineman, a high offensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, if this was me picking, I would absolutely pick Tristan Wirfs or other offensive tackle, but I don't trust Dave Gettleman. He pretty much.
Who you were picking though?
I mean, I'm picking. Also, sorry, my cat's about to come in here.
No, but I hear you. You want to put yourself in Gettleman's shoes. I get it. Yeah.
So moving on to pick 5.
Yes.
That would be
Okay, so the Detroit Lions, they traded down, as we mentioned, from pick 3. And they're going to get the guy that they would have taken at 3, and they just happened to get an extra second-round pick. So they're the beneficiary of sitting there, and I guess you could say beneficiary of having that first pick after Chase Young for where really a quarterback could go. So they're going to take Jeffrey Okudah, cornerback, The Ohio State University. They just traded out Darius Slay. They need a number 1 corner to be able to replace him in that division. So that's the pick.
Yeah, definitely a pick that they need, especially with how limited they are in the cornerback position. And I know they want to build up that defense, especially with Matt Patricia at the helm.
And now I'm sipping my White Claw because my work's done.
Because the Texans are about to be on the. No, they're not. They don't have a first round.
All right, so that puts the Los Angeles Chargers on the clock at 6, and with some buzz that we wanted to go Tua Tagovailoa, it's hard to ignore them wanting to go with potentially a quarterback. And I think that as far as the fit with this, I think it makes sense that they could potentially sit this type of quarterback and potentially sit him for maybe half a season, maybe even a year, and then give the reins to him, considering they like to give the reins to Tyrod Taylor for 1 year. So with the 6th overall selection, the Los Angeles Chargers select Justin Herbert, quarterback from Oregon.
Yeah, especially with the departure of Philip Rivers this year, it makes a lot of sense for the Chargers to want to go all in on a quarterback. As you mentioned, they did miss out on Tua, but I definitely think they have a good selection here in Justin Herbert, who was supposed to come out last year but decided to stay for an extra year. So does it help? We're not sure, but it definitely helps the Chargers in this stance.
I like Herbert. I think that he's got a really good ceiling. He fits the mold of what the NFL wants this year, and especially with the swagger and everything that he presents as a quarterback. He's got an incredible arm. The accuracy, when it's on point, is pretty remarkable. I would say that it's right on par with those guys like Burrow and Tua. Tua is probably a little bit more efficient, and everything. But I love Herbert. I think that he fits that mobility, and it gives him a mobile quarterback, something they really didn't have with Phillip Rivers, and now they have two quarterbacks like that with Tyrod and Herbert.
Wonder if that's maybe a spot where we could see Jordan Love, a little surprise pick. There's been a lot of talk about him going in the top 10 picks, and the Chargers are one of those teams that really keeps everything close to the vest. And I know Travis can speak to that, having covered them for a while, but that's a team that nobody ever really knows what they're going to do. And if the talk is that Jordan Love's going top 10, top 14, you never know. That could be the squad, especially since they seem so hell bent on Tyrod, however you pronounce his first name, being the starter this year.
Yeah.
I could see it, honestly, man. I think with Mahomes in the division, you got to have a big time playmaker out there, and Herbert, great player, great pick. I think. I just wonder out loud, could they be the spot? I mean, I think that'll be interesting as we go over the next 4 or 5 days here.
Well, yeah, and especially with the Patriots now potentially maybe even looking at a guy. Now, granted, we don't know if they officially believe in Stidham, but they could be one of those teams that, despite no draft capital, say right now, do they do something and go get Jordan Love?
All right, and now with that selection, we now have the Carolina Panthers on the clock, who I believe Travis has the pick.
Yeah, the Carolina Panthers were hoping to get Isaiah Simmons right here. The Giants stepped in and took him, so they're going to pivot to their backup plan, and they're going to take Derek Brown, defensive lineman out of Auburn. Looking at this team's depth chart, they don't have anything on defense as far as a playmaker goes. They don't have Luke Kuechly anymore. So they're going to take Brown here and hope to jumpstart the defense some way.
Yeah, I love the Isaiah Simmons fit for Carolina if he gets there. With everything, losing Luke Kuechly, and getting that jump start from Matt Rule's system, it fits. And so the fact that the Giants took Simmons, I think, puts even more emphasis on another really good defensive player on that board like Derek Brown. I love that pick for Carolina. I think he compares favorably to Ndamukong Suh in that regard.
You just had to mention a Nebraska player.
Just slide it in
All
there.
right.
Yeah.
All right. So now we come up to number 8 with the Arizona Cardinals, and I believe Sayer has the pick for the Cardinals.
Yes, that's right. So the Cardinals here are interesting. I think if the board goes this way, if this is the top 8 picks, I think this is prime real estate for some team to trade up, especially for CJ Henderson, or maybe it's our Broncos for a wide receiver. Maybe it's the Falcons coming up for Javon Kinlaw with Derek Brown going 1 pick before. So I think one of my teams, the Falcons or the Saints, could be a trade up team here for the Cardinals. But I'm gonna stay put for Arizona. I'm going to invest in protecting Kyler Murray and keep investing in that offense and going with their scheme fit. Just getting a guy that's going to be really, really tough to get around at all times. And so I'm going to take, with the 8th overall pick in the 2020 draft, the Arizona Cardinals select Mekhi Becton, and they're going to get themselves a guy who has played both right and left tackle, who, you can't go through him. You can't really get around him. And Kyler Murray needs that. And I think that if Andrew, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of their left tackle, DJ Humphries, excuse me, not Andrew. DJ Humphries, if he's not any good in the next couple of years, maybe they get out of that contract and put Becton over at left tackle. But for this point in time, this gives them a guy at right tackle who's going to be really tough and keep that offensive line moving forward under our old pal, Sean Kugler, the offensive line coach in Arizona now. So I think this is a good pick for them, a safe pick.
Can I ask
Man,
why why Becton instead of like a guy like a Tristan Wirfs in that regard, considering his insurance policy of being a left tackle, right tackle.
Yeah, definitely. So I think Wirfs would be a great pick here. It's all the beauty is going to be in the eye of the beholder for this offensive line class. And when you look at Wirfs and the offense that he played at Iowa, I think that he's going to be an ideal fit for a team that runs a lot of zone concepts, especially in their running game. Getting him out into space a lot. I don't necessarily think that the Cardinals are going to ask their offensive linemen to do that all the time, even though Becton could be good at that. But for me, ultimately Becton, I think, has higher upside immediately as a pass protector, just because of the fact, like I said, at his size and his athleticism with his length, you can't really run through him. You can't really run around him. So I think in protecting Kyler Murray, I think he's a little bit further ahead right now than Wirfs is. Although Wirfs is certainly no slouch as a pass protector, we know that. But I just think in that regard, Becton gives them an immediate upgrade in pass protection and a guy that's going to be tough for NFL, even NFL edge defenders to get past.
Can you imagine having the job of having to spy Kyler Murray and you got to look around that man, like that monster of a man to find him? Like, good luck. Good luck.
So we now move to number 9, which is owned by the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is owned by me. So in this one, I was thinking so much about what to do, especially with how this board is right now, with there's Wirfs still on the board, Jedrick Wills on the board, Andrew Thomas on the board, and you still have Javon Kinlaw. So earlier, the Jaguars did attempt to trade up in order to grab grab Okudah or to grab a defensive player. But now with those off the board, it's just kind of where would the Jaguars go here. So I'm actually going to bring our first big hopefully shocking pick so far. And with the 9th overall pick in the 2020 NFL draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Jerry Jeudy from Alabama. The Jaguars do not have a whole lot on their wide receiver core, and especially with Minshew performing the way he has been, he's going to definitely need some weapons to throw to, and therefore Jeudy, they could have gone with Henry Ruggs or CeeDee Lamb, but I feel like Jeudy fits them a little bit better than the others.
I think Judy would be a good fit for that. No, I think that's a good pick, Ty.
I can
That's definitely a
imagine what
curveball.
everyone's going to think if the Jaguars take an offensive player after all the defensive players they've let go and traded, and especially at corner. I mean, they kind of back themselves into a corner, no pun intended. I think they might reach for a corner there, but getting a guy like Jeudy to go opposite DJ Chark, who made the Pro Bowl, that's not a bad pick by any means. Especially if you're rolling the dice on Minshew. I mean, if that's the way that you're going, you either have to put a great defense around him or you've got to give him some weapons. And so I like it, Ty. I think it's creative for them, and it'd be interesting for sure. It would throw a wrench in a lot of people's plans, that's for sure.
Yeah. Not that that was the intention to throw a wrench in, but it was definitely like something I feel like if the board had fallen the way this does, then I think they'll just worry about going defense, and they still have another first round pick later on. So maybe with that one they'll go defense. So in order to help out Minshew, it'd be helpful to have. Again, they could have gone for any of the offensive tackles, but I think having a receiver to complement, like you said, DJ Chark is going to really go a long way for them.
Well, I
And
think I was gonna say too, from what I've been reading too, CJ Henderson's getting some love going in the top 14. So if the board necessarily fell this way, we might even have seen CJ Henderson go to Jacksonville at 9, potentially even 2, or even Kinlaw at 9, maybe, I don't know. And 9 might be a little bit of a reach for a guy with injury concerns, but so I think that it would be rather interesting to see certainly what Jacksonville would do in that type of scenario, given that there are still some premier defensive talent available still.
Well, they are potentially going to be trading Leonard Fournette, so that whole offense could look completely different next year. They could put in a whole new scheme, one that's not having to force feed Fournette a lot, and they could open it up a little bit. So Judy in the slot is a perfect fit if that's what they're going to end up doing.
So after the first,
Yeah.
what it appears was the big shocker so far, we now move on to Cleveland with the number 10 pick.
Okay, so Cleveland kind of had a couple wrenches thrown at them in this draft already. It is very obvious that Cleveland has a dire need for offensive line. Sorry, my cat's trying to call on my laptop. They need to get protection for Baker Mayfield, or they're just going to continue to hit a wall. So, I had somebody fall to Cleveland that I was not expecting. So, with the 10th overall pick, Cleveland is going to select Tristan Wirfs, offensive tackle from Iowa. I think with him, on most big boards, him being one of the top tackles, that's, if he falls to them, I think that's who they will follow.
I will say, if you're Cleveland, you are jumping for joy in that scenario. You have a guy that could potentially be your Joe Thomas for quite a while. And if Cleveland lucks out in that situation, that's a really, really, really good scenario for Cleveland.
Yeah, it's a good scenario for Wirfs too. I mean, we talked about him being a fit for the zone offense, and who did Cleveland just hire as their new head coach? Kevin Stefanski, who coming over from working under Gary Kubiak for a year in Minnesota as the offensive coordinator there. So really good fit for him. He would have to kick over to the left side, which I think it was Wirfs who had the interesting analogy that it was like wiping your butt with the other hand, which was hilarious to me. But he would have to go to the left side with Conklin coming in as the big money free agent, but he's shown that he can do that. And so I know how much it pleases Andrews and my hearts to see Tristan Wirfs as its top 10 pick. Makes it worth the while that he left our beloved Hawkeyes a year early, a year too soon. But that would be awesome to see for sure.
It does make me quite happy.
All right, so now we go to the Jets, where this will be especially for the Denver Broncos. It's going to be interesting because it's going to really this board could really depend on what the Jets do here at number 11. And so, Maddie, what do we have for the New York Jets?
No pressure.
Please. I'm not afraid of breaking hearts. Y'all know from last night. But I will say that I think things will hold serve. They've invested a lot in their interior offensive line, but they really need help on the outside of their offensive line. So with the 11th pick in the 2020 NFL draft, the Jets select Jedrick Wills Jr., potentially the best offensive lineman in the draft.
Thanks, Maddie. You're my best friend.
Yeah, I think
I got
No,
you.
no, it's Marty. That's Marty.
Marty.
Yeah, Marty.
Great Scott.
I think for Broncos country, if they're listening to this, they're all breathing a huge sigh of an exhale right there. With the Jets taking offensive linemen.
I feel like we're going to be really anxious at this point if you still have 2 of your 3 big wide receivers up on the board.
Yep.
I will say if Jacksonville does take Judy at 9, our blood pressure will be boiling.
Yes. That board for the Jets is almost like if we had two of the top 3 wide receivers sitting on the board at 15. Like, if you're the Jets, how could you even imagine having both Andrew Thomas and Jedrick Wills sitting there for you? I mean, that would be probably a dream scenario for them. And this is danger territory. This is really the section of the draft that's like, okay, either the Broncos are going to move up and get one of these quote unquote top 3 guys, or we're going to miss out completely because we know the Raiders are probably taking one, and somebody could easily jump us of all that we've put out there of how much we like this receiver class. Somebody could easily jump ahead of us and get to Tampa Bay's spot or San Francisco's spot. And it puts us in a dangerous territory here for the Broncos. I mean, we have to. This is where it gets me feeling that we have to be aggressive if we want to get one of Judy, Lamb, or Ruggs in this first round and get that true impact player. There's so many scenarios where you could say, oh yeah, one of those top 3 guys is going to be there at 15, but at the same time, if even one of them goes before 10, it puts us in a situation where somebody's going to trade up for one and the Raiders are going to take the other one. So to me, I don't see how Elway doesn't trade up. If that's truly if we're going first round wide receiver, this is where, to me, this is a scenario that I think they're going to go through obviously tomorrow as they get back to work on this, that they're going to say, okay, we pretty much are between a rock and a hard place. Either we trade up and get one, or we stand pat and we have to kind of improvise a little bit.
If you have a guy in mind, get your guy. I mean, that's basically what it's going to come down to. And
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
no, Maddie, I'm gonna make my pick, so you go first, and then I'll.
I was just gonna say, I intentionally, my fingernails are a little longer than normal. I've left them long just so I have something to gnaw off next week. 'Cause by the time we hit like pick 8, it's gonna be game time. It's gonna be on. Like I don't know how I'm gonna be able to like give analysis for each pick because like we're gonna do that on Periscope.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. Like I'm gonna be like too focused, like F5ing everything.
Well, especially
all over the place. So
especially once I think that 8th pick rolls around, I think the anticipation and everything, it's just going to be like, okay, where do we go? Like exactly like how is this board going to fall? Because it's at that particular point where that 8 and 10, was usually the rumor from what Woody Page said yesterday. That we may be trading up, or that's what he's thinking that we're going to be doing. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if the Broncos want a wide receiver and the board falls like this, I think Denver's kind of stuck in a tough spot. I think the Jets could easily have taken a wide receiver. The Raiders are going to take a wide receiver here with Henry Ruggs. I know it's not Al Davis's team, but the Raiders still like speed, and Henry Ruggs would fit incredible in that offense. He's not just a speed guy; he's also a great route runner. He's a guy who's a threat to score anytime he touches the ball. And I think with John Gruden's offense, he can find a way to get Henry Ruggs the ball and make him make some plays. So Henry Ruggs is off the board to pick number 12 with the Raiders.
Let's look at that from the Broncos perspective, right? I mean, that means that 4 games a year, you've got Ruggs, Tyreek Hill, and the whole
Cole Hardman,
the other players coming in, Keenan Allen on the Chargers. I mean, that's brutal. And so at this point now, you've almost got to be hoping, if you're the Broncos at 15, is CJ Henderson gonna still be there? Because now we need to cover Henry Ruggs and Tyreek Hill, probably going to be the 2 fastest wide receivers in the NFL going forward. 4 games a year, potentially 5 if we have to see them in the playoffs again. So, I mean, man, that's brutal. That again, that feeds into the we should trade up mentality of like, okay, do we want to see these guys 4 times a year or more, and not have anything to go up against it really? So very interesting, very heartbreaking pick for the Broncos.
And we also kind of have to figure out how to cover a tight end in our division too, right? So that occupies the safety a little bit. So that's not a lot of help we can give over the top. So we're between a rock and a hard place defensively.
My pick?
Yep.
Oh, sure.
All right. So with the 13th pick, 49ers will select CeeDee Lamb. Puts the Broncos in a tough spot now, but
Dang it, Graham.
Ooh,
did what I got to do.
really?
I was gonna pick Jovan Kinlaw, but I think receiver is more important
Yeah.
personally.
I think receiver for me is going to be the tricky one for the 49ers because do they really, in my estimation, do they really need a wide receiver? I don't know. And I guess the definition would be need because they have Debo Samuel, they have Bourne, they have Marquise Goodwin coming back, even though there's been rumors and stuff with the trade.
Telling me
you know,
CeeDee Lamb's on an upgrade over Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like, get my
We're
mind.
trying to will CeeDee Lamb to Denver at
Yeah.
15. I get it though. I
Trying to
get where
will
you're
it
coming
that,
from,
we
Cam,
get,
because one of your
CeeDee
best
Lamb.
defensive players is now gone. I mean, Buckner's gone, and they don't necessarily have someone to just up and replace one of the best defensive linemen in the league. So I hear what you're saying. It could easily be Kinlaw there, but you're talking about pairing up CeeDee Lamb and Debo Samuel and George Kittle in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Like, think about us as fans. Like, if that was our team, we'd be all over that for sure. You know what I'm saying? So I see where Graham's coming from with that. I mean, I've never seen a mock draft with CeeDee Lamb to the 49ers, but if you think about it, like think about that combination. Think about having those weapons on your team. Like that's crazy. That's definitely enviable from our perspective. Having Sutton and Fan and wishing we had one of those guys for sure.
The next DeAndre Hopkins. Good pick.
All right. So, Cameron, where do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go at number 14?
All right. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they can go a lot of different directions. They have Tom Brady now at quarterback. They don't need wide receiver. Or they probably could have gone wide receiver just for best player available. I don't know. But, there's been a lot of talk as far as them wanting to go best player available. And there's been some smoke even beyond this month that there's a particular defensive lineman that they've been attached to. And he fell into their lap. And for Tampa Bay, they will select Javon Kinlaw from the University of South Carolina. I think that he's a really in some way, you get those people that are feeling, okay, is he better than Derek Brown? Is he better than, what are those things? So I don't know. But for me, if you can have the opportunity to get a guy that is a pretty disruptive force and a guy that can, really create a lot of havoc on your defensive line, and especially, with a guy that, you can pair with an Ndamukong Suh. I mean, that's a pretty nightmare situation of a defensive line going up in that NFC South.
Do you guys think Tom Brady's going to be part of the draft room this year for the Buccaneers? Hey, you better.
Wasn't that a condition of his that he got some say in personnel moves?
That would be awesome. I mean, he might as well, right?
Yep.
Man, it's
All right.
interesting.
Travis, the moment we all been waiting for. Wide receivers are gone. There's not a whole lot to go off with. So where do you think, if this is how the board falls, the Broncos stand here?
Yeah, this board kind of blew up for the Broncos, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've held to the belief that the Broncos should take one of those top 3 wide receivers if they were there. Now they're not. Kinlaw's off the board as well. But going back to what Sayer said a few minutes ago about Ruggs now being in the division based on the mock draft that we're doing now. Hill's in the division, so we're going to have to go with C.J. Anderson, corner out of Florida. I think this would be a good position for the team to trade back in, maybe try to get like Kenneth Murray out of Oklahoma later on. But we're going to stay in it for the sake of this draft. We're going to stay in the number 15 spot, and we'll take Anderson. We're going to obviously need somebody to complement Boye on the outside and stick with the receivers who are now in this division based on this mock. So that's where we'll go.
it's really hard to ignore that. And I think that corner's probably the fallback option. The cornerback or guys like Jeremy Chin, uh, probably as well, would probably fall into that category as far as the trade back candidate. But yeah, you have to consider corner, I would say. As far as the fallback option and with everything that's there, and one of the, I guess, the wild card options, and granted, it's that tackle point that gets mentioned so often on Twitter. But
And for me,
Andrew Thomas is there. Andrew Thomas was there for Denver if they wanted to go tackle. So I mean, they probably could have gone Andrew Thomas if they wanted to. That's been some talk, I guess, is that they may want and they really like Andrew Thomas. So I guess they could go Andrew Thomas if they didn't want to go C.J. Henderson. But it just seems like, as we were saying before, the Broncos need 3 starters out of the like day 1 and day 2, and wide receiver and corner fits that bill.
I think if, in my opinion, your top 2 picks this year, if it's not wide receiver, like I've been dreaming, it's got to be wide receiver corner. I mean, to heck with the offensive line, right? I mean, I'll be the antagonist here for the offensive line argument. 5 sacks in 5
Right.
games, right? And 2 games with 0. So that's with Bowles and Wilkinson at tackle, and now we've got hopefully James coming back and another offseason of Bowles under Mike Munchak's coaching. I'm banking on that. I mean, you're paying Mike Munchak a lot of money. Probably I would bet, I don't know this for a fact, but I would bet he's probably the highest paid assistant coach, position coach in the league. If not, he's up there in the top however many. And so you're paying Munchak to come in and work with a first rounder, a high money free agent, another high money free agent at guard with Glasgow, and then second rounder in Dalton Reisner and whoever else at center. So it's not like you've given him an empty cupboard to work with. You've given him guys that you've invested a lot in, and you're expecting him to turn some things around a little bit. And so to me, that's where I say tackle. Like I'm saying, screw that in the first 2 rounds, because that guy better not play in the first year with Garrett Bowles, hopefully taking another step forward as a first round pick.
Right.
And that's not impossible. That's definitely not impossible for him to do. And so I'm all on board for corner here if we don't get one of the top 3 receivers, especially if Henderson's on the board, just because of the fact that I think that Henderson is a top 10 talent. I think people drove him away from Broncos country because of his tackling or inability to tackle. But a lot of people, will make excuses for guys for certain reasons, like Denzel Mims, dropping passes and that being because of a broken hand. But nobody wants to excuse the fact that CJ Henderson's playing on a bum leg all year for Florida. And so to me, this is the top cover corner in the draft besides Okuda. And he's on that same tier. He's not a tier below. To me, he's on the same tier. I mean, you watch him play, nobody got Jamar Chase into the slot except for CJ Henderson. Jamar Chase, the most dominant receiver in college this past year, got everybody all out of sorts. AJ Terrell, worst game of his year. Everybody has to throw that tape out, basically. CJ Henderson forced him into the slot. And LSU didn't do that often because they had the best slot receiver in college football. So to me, no-brainer pick. I think it's a great pick. And if it's offensive line here, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm going to be super mad about it.
Well, and again, it goes back to the point of the 3 starters. Like, I guess, it makes sense from the long-term perspective to go tackle. Like, it makes sense for the long-term perspective. But at the same point in time, it's like you need an impact starter out of this particular draft. And so I mean, you absolutely have to go with, that starter guy, that the guy that can be a corner. Maybe in this particular situation, maybe they also trade back too and go get, a guy like a Justin Jefferson or a guy like a Denzel Mims or a Brandon Ayuk, and even I think Kliss was saying they could even still have they could still have 2 first-round picks and come back and get another first rounder. I think still in the 20s. So I mean, I think you would have to consider all options. So I mean, they could trade back still in this situation, but you still need an impact starter. and 100% it can't be tackle.
I'm gonna go contrarian. So I think I just because I want to get my say in here because I've been on this train for several weeks. Those of you in the Slack chat definitely can attest to it. Look, this is what we know about Bowles. He's obviously hasn't been good enough to get that 5th-year option, right? We know that for sure. We also know that James hasn't proven that he could stay healthy. It's a thing, right? Like we're paying him a lot of money, and I think if he's healthy, he could be the answer at right tackle. But as of right now, it's like we don't have anything proven at tackle right now. We could get a potential top 10 talent fall into our laps at tackle, which has been a position of need for a long time. Really, since Clady, we haven't had anybody that's been able to lock down that left tackle position. Very important. Also, our biggest signing, hopefully doesn't have to play center. Hopefully we can play him at right guard and we could bring in a center in the 2nd round. So you're talking wide receiver corner, and that's sexy, man. Give me them monsters in the trenches and protect Drew Lock. I kind of want us to double dip on offensive line and figure it out from there. But I'm contrarian. I get it. I understand. Throw tomatoes at me later. Boo me if you want to, but that's the hill I'm going to die on.
Yeah, I love it, man. I think that honestly, if you go Andrew Thomas round 1, like what Andrew Thomas is as a prospect is a day 1 starter at left tackle and a long time starter at left tackle. Like he is what he is, and what he is really good at what he does. So that for that reason, I feel like Andrew Thomas is going to be gone long before 15. But if he's sitting there, I think it's a real conversation that you have to say, okay, is this guy an upgrade immediately over Garrett Bowles? And if he is, how do we reshape the rest of the draft around it? Because the Broncos left holes at receiver and corner and center, and they didn't leave a hole at tackle necessarily. So I get where you guys are coming from for sure. Andrew Thomas, great player, great prospect,
Right.
will be good for a long time. So I would get it.
Reluctantly.
Yeah. So I think I'm on the clock, right? Atlanta Falcons.
Yes, you are.
All right. So Atlanta's 2 top targets right now in this draft just got picked. TJ Henderson, Javon Kinlaw. I'm pretty sure they're going to trade up for one of those 2 guys. I'm relatively positive. And I don't know. We'll see if it plays out that way. But they relieved Trufant at the corner. Their defensive line is kind of in a shambles. They're like borderline in this rebuilding stage / they have Matt Ryan and a lot of weapons on offense, and they just traded a 2nd rounder for Hayden Hurst. So like one side of their team is rebuild on defense, and the other side of their team is like, hey, we're competing for a Super Bowl. We signed Todd Gurley and all, so there's so much different going on both sides of the ball. But this pick for Atlanta has to be defense, and I'm taking Patrick Queen with this pick. I think it's a bit of a reach, quite honestly, but at the same time, maybe it's not, because Patrick Queen is definitely the best 3-down linebacker in this draft. And I know Maddie and Ty and all the Oklahoma Sooners fans lament at Kenneth Murray not being the best 3-down linebacker in this draft, but Patrick Queen is the number 1 coverage linebacker in this class, and he's hands down, in my opinion, going to translate the quickest to the NFL and with his instincts, the way that he plays the game. We've only got really 1 year of Patrick Queen playing at a high level at LSU, and we've got 3 years of Kenneth Murray at Oklahoma. But Patrick Queen, to me, is the modern NFL. Shut down the tight end, cover the running backs out of the backfield, play fast at all times, play the run. He does it all. So if Atlanta's stuck here, Patrick Queen's the guy for me.
I think for Atlanta too, this may be worst case scenario if they really wanted Javon Kinlaw and CJ Henderson, with CJ Henderson being kind of the guy that they like, right? Because there's been rumors they may trade up to, inside the top 10 for Henderson, or maybe even Kinlaw for that matter. So I mean, in some ways, this might be like a worst case scenario for Atlanta. So while Patrick Queen could be a reach, maybe they trade back. I don't know, but you still have to go defense. So I agree with. I think that offensive line might be an interesting one for Atlanta because, I think Atlanta's offensive line is still a little bit in shambles from what I know.
Yeah, and they just took 2 first rounders on the offensive line last year, so that would be, I mean, that would be tough. 3 straight first round picks on an offensive lineman, but I mean, you got to do what you got to do,
Oh,
but
yeah.
All right. So Dallas was going to select here at 17, but Jerry Jones decided to initiate a trade with Bill Belichick. The Patriots and Cowboys have agreed on a trade. Travis and I have agreed. So they will swap first round picks, and Dallas will get New England's 98th and 100th overall. And so now with that move, the New England Patriots are on the clock.
Yeah, the Patriots are coming up here with this trade because they're just going to get the guy that they want at this point. We talked about this guy earlier with the Chargers pick. If I was the Chargers, this is the guy I would take. We're going to probably surprise a few of you guys with this choice, but we're going to take Jordan Love, quarterback out of Utah State. I just think the potential is just way too much to pass up on.
Mm-hmm.
They lost Tom Brady. They need a new quarterback. To me, it's not Jarrett Stidham. It's just not. Jordan Love, the arm strength, the potential, it's just too much to pass up on. I think Belichick likes him. Somebody's going to take a chance on this guy in the first round. Tonight, it's the Patriots.
Yeah, Maddie and I were doing a mock draft yesterday, and Jordan Love actually fell to the Patriots in that mock that we did, and that was like a perfect storm for New England, I would say, without even giving up anything and having Jordan Love fall. He's like a weird situation. Like the talent is just, it's there. And in some ways, he kind of like Herbert, as we were saying, right? That he fits that mold of like some of today's NFL. Jordan Love is that same guy. Like he's that guy that can throw from any arm angle. He's mobile. He's big. I mean, really, I would say his strongest knock is he comes from a program that didn't win a lot of football games. And, and so that's been kind of his strongest knock. And so I think that Jordan Love is one of those guys that will be really successful in the NFL. And we've seen that sometimes happen in college football where you have a team that, they may not have been a successful program, but yet come to the NFL and every situation that's around him, like New England, it's like a perfect storm for a guy like Jordan Love, and especially with a guy like a Josh McDaniels there that can coach him and really get the best out of him and the best situation for him.
If you want to know how good Jordan Love is, he had me and a national audience of people watching Utah State versus Wake Forest last September, wanting to see what the heck this guy was going to do next. I mean, there were some throws that he made in that game in particular, which he made some really bad decisions in that game as well. But there were some throws that he made that you were like, dang, like this guy could be top 5 potential in terms of just his raw ability. And those opinions generally for NFL people don't change like over time. Like if they see a top 5 guy, unless he totally bombs, he's going to be that guy to that coach. Coaches are egomaniacs. So when they see a guy that they're like, all right, I can, and Josh McDaniels is the perfect example because who did he take in the first round the last time that he was in charge of a draft? That would be Tim Tebow. So I definitely could see New England making a move up. I don't buy the Jarrett Stidham thing. Like the Patriots, of course, they want to think they're the sum of all their parts, but Tom Brady was a huge reason why that team was so good. And there's no doubt that they have to use a high draft pick to replace him. I don't buy the Jarrett Stidham thing. And if they are going to go that route, then we're all going to get to finally enjoy the New England Patriots have a losing season for the first time in however long. So if they want to go Stidham, I'm for it. If they want to go Jordan Love, I think that's a nice move for them.
So Dolphins picked earlier up at number 3, and so now we have their second first-round pick of this draft, and I believe Shelby is controlling. Shelby's controlling their last 2 first-round picks. So Shelby, where did the Dolphins go with their second first-round pick?
All right. So as we know, the Dolphins are kind of in rebuild mode right now. They have quite a few positions that they need to address. So I would say they're probably just going to go best player available here. And they had a player kind of surprisingly fall into their lap. So I'm going to go Andrew Thomas, tackle from Georgia.
Man, so we got a Bulldog blocking for an Alabama Crimson Tide quarterback. That's going to be fun.
Man,
Oh my gosh.
If you're the Dolphins, you're literally sprinting. Well, I guess you're virtually, but you're sprinting to the fax machine or the cell phone or whatever you can do to get this pick in because you can't believe he's there.
well, and
You're zooming that pick in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're the Dolphins too, I would say you're about as ecstatic as you can be. Like I especially with the amount of draft capital that you've had, you traded up, you got Tua, and and then you end up getting Andrew Thomas to fall in your lap. I mean, that's like, if you're the Dolphins and everything, and the amount of money that you spent on that team, defensively, offensively, what have you, I would say that future's pretty dang bright.
If you're Miami and these are your first 2 picks, book it. This team is one of the 14 playoff squads. Because Tua, to me, if he's healthy, he's going to light it up as a rookie. And getting Andrew Thomas, who is the best pure left tackle in this draft right now, NFL ready to start. The moves that they made in free agency to go get Byron Jones and Kyle Van Noy and all these other guys on defense and on the offensive line. And they already have a pretty solid group of receivers and backs right now. And they have another first-round pick. Man, if that's what the Dolphins do, if these are their first 2 picks, whether by trade or however else, they're going to be good in 2020 for sure.
The guy who's popping bubbly after both of these picks is Devontae Parker, because he's like, I got a quarterback to throw to me, and he's going to have time to get it to me. So that's a win. Let's go.
Right.
Let's go. All right. So pick 19.
Pick 19.
With the Raiders. So it was interesting. We talked about the Bulldog blocking for the Alabama Crimson Tide member. The Raiders took an Alabama Crimson Tide player with their first pick, and their second pick is going to be an LSU player at their other greatest need, Christian Fulton. Now, I will tweet this out again, but Eric Crocker, a guy who's tied in with the 49ers organization, he's a guru when it comes to the cornerback wide receiver battle. He had a really good video breakdown of Henry Ruggs and what that looks like. And a lot of the corner that was on him in that game was Christian Fulton. So if you can understand how much of a freak athlete Henry Ruggs is, I think everybody that's watching this or cares, because they're Broncos fans mostly, they know that. But what they may not know is that Christian Fulton actually locked him down a lot of that game. And I think that this is a pick that's going to help the Raiders. We just mentioned, like, there's a lot of speed and there are a lot of guys to cover in that division. They need somebody to throw at Cortland Sutton also. So I think this is just a slam dunk pick for the Raiders. And I hate it.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, Travis, what was your point of the trade? Because there's been rumors, right, that Jordan Love may be taken by the Oakland Raiders. So was your thought process as far as the trade to jump in front of Oakland because with New England's pick, because you thought that Jordan Love potentially was going to be taken at 19?
That's exactly what it was. In fact, when Ty first came to me about a trade, I thought no. And then I went and looked at the board to see the teams that were still there, and the Raiders were the one that popped out. So I wanted to get ahead of them to make sure the Patriots were able to get him.
Yeah, I can see it. And I guess the other thing too with the Raiders is, do we get a surprise here? They love Clemson players. So Matty took Christian Fulton. Could we see AJ Terrell at 19?
Too high.
Oh, I know, I
high,
know,
but
I know.
that's their MO right now. Too high. That's the Raiders draft mantra right now. Too high. I was saying kicker. I was calling for kicker, but I don't know
Yeah, Blankenship.
Oh, man.
Take Blankenship in the
There you
first
go,
round.
Sebastian Janikowski isn't walking through that door.
At 45 years old, or how old he is.
I know Rodrigo Blankenship's a good kicker, but the fact that Keith Duncan didn't win the Lou Groza, like I will literally never root for Rodrigo. If he like signs with the Broncos for whatever reason and he's kicking for them, I still won't root for him. I can't. I never will.
I'm officially muting.
Keith
Andrew.
Duncan got robbed.
I'm
Very nice.
officially muting Andrew.
Fair enough.
Duncan.
I'm
He's
also
got the next pick.
I got the next pick, and it is in. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to select Antoine Winfield Jr., safety out of
Ooh.
Minnesota. They need some defensive backs. They need some safety help. I think Antoine Winfield is possibly my favorite player in this draft outside of any of the Iowa players. I think he is a phenomenal athlete. The only issue with him is his injuries, but if you watch literally any game with him, he's one of the biggest reasons why Minnesota was one of the top-ranked teams in the nation throughout the year. Watching Penn State should have won that game if there was not an Antoine Winfield Jr. on the field. He made a couple key interceptions at the end of the game. I mean, the guy's just a player. He's a smart guy. He's going to, he's a film room warrior, son of an NFL player of like 10, 11 years. Like this is the guy you want on your team. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars need some leadership. They need a veteran, like some guy who's going to come in there and be that veteran presence right away. So,
just for as much hate as I was just giving you about Keith Duncan, Andrew, I really love that pick because, like, if you were to actually foresee a situation where Antoine Winfield will be picked ahead of Xavier McKinney and Jeremy Chin at this particular point, I don't think I would have foreseen that. But with Antoine Winfield, you look at his tape, you turn his tape on, there's hardly any negative plays from the guy. And, really his only significant red flag is injuries. So I could potentially see a team in the first round. I don't know whether it'll be Jacksonville at this particular point and stuff, but, I could see them really taking a chance on a guy like an Antoine Winfield just because he's a game wrecker at safety and he plays with his hair on fire. And yeah.
It was tough. Honestly, I considered Jeremy Chin, Xavier McKinley. Like I said, I've watched Antoine Winfield Jr. I've watched most of his games because I wanted to see if Minnesota was actually as good as the record said, and so I could talk crap about him. To be completely transparent, I saw Jeremy Chin down at the Senior Bowl. I thought he had. Honestly, I wasn't super impressed with some of his. I wasn't impressed with his first 2 days, but overall he had a pretty good Senior Bowl. But Winfield Jr. is just my man. Grant Delpit, another guy that people are probably wondering about. Obviously, I think he had a lot of concerns coming in or after the season. Like just the guy can't tackle, seems lazy, dropped significantly. So yeah, Winfield Jr. is my top guy.
Wait until the last second. I'm just kidding.
I don't have a
I
clock.
think we know what this pick needs to be.
What's that?
Actually, I was gonna say we may see a quick 2-pick run here on wide receivers.
Just deciding on 2 guys here.
Got a coin handy?
What's that?
Just flip a coin.
Justin Jefferson.
There you go. That's the pick.
Yeah.
That's a good one for them, for sure.
If you were to think as far as, and I think it's a huge testament to Carson Wentz with what he did with the Philadelphia Eagles at the end of last year with literally no wide receiving core. And now you add Justin Jefferson, who is probably the best route runner behind Jerry Jeudy, and a guy that could potentially play outside or inside. And for Philly, that's a best case scenario too, because there's been talk that he may even be taken by Denver at 15 or maybe inside of 20. So I guess that'll continue my wide receiver pick too. And with Minnesota's pick, they will select Denzel Mims from the University of Baylor.
Very interesting pick there, Cameron.
Well, I just think that he's a guy that probably you can probably work on his game. He's a long strider. He does compare, I would say, a little favorably to Demaryius Thomas coming out of college. Not saying he'll be Demaryius Thomas in the NFL by any stretch of the imagination. But I mean, you give a big catch radius to a guy like Kirk Cousins. I think that really fills a void. Now, granted, they probably could have done a reach here and taken Brandon Ayuk, but I think they just felt that with the fit and giving a big body receiver for a guy like Kirk Cousins, it was hard to pass up. The other, we had another guy certainly in mind, but I think we were potentially saving it for maybe near the end of the first round, because there's a potential chance that he'll be there. But I think Denzel Mims was the prime candidate.
All right. So after resuming from the trade with the Patriots and the Cowboys are now back on the clock with 23. It was actually pretty impressive that they were able to get that trade, grab some draft picks, and still have the guy that they wanted all this time to fall to them. They're definitely going to need some help rushing that quarterback. So with the 23rd overall pick, the Dallas Cowboys select Kalavion Kiazon from LSU.
He fell to 23. Like that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's some talk that somebody posted something a couple weeks ago about guys who missed 2 or more years of their college careers, maybe dropping. I think it was maybe Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl guy, or something, talking about players who missed 2 or more years dropping further than anyone really thinks. And I think Chason's one of those guys that he was talking about potentially. At the same time, he is like everything that coaches want in a football player. Like, he can play all over the field. He was, as a redshirt sophomore this year, one of the team captains at LSU. He actually stopped some of his teammates in one of their games. I don't know if you guys remember this, but on the sideline, he was preventing some of his teammates from getting ejected from the game, just kind of letting cooler heads prevail. But he's that type of glue guy that I think, gosh, he's so interesting. I know that the Broncos don't need a guy like that, but to me, just in terms of, you want your linebackers to be able to do so much. And he's proven, even in small spurts with his injury history, that he can really do everything for you, from rushing the passer to playing in coverage to playing the run, coming off the edge, playing off the ball. So, yeah, you're right. For Dallas, that's definitely a dream scenario. You pick up 2 additional third-round picks and still get him there to replace Robert Quinn, and that's a great pick for them, in my opinion. Which leads to the New Orleans Saints. I picked number 24, and this is another team that this is just a tough team to predict. They seem to trade up high in the first round every other year or every 2 years or whatever it is. And they're kind of unpredictable from that standpoint. So, I mean, when you look at their roster, gosh, they have a good roster, don't they? They have a good
No
roster.
holes.
Not many holes on this team. Definitely not.
And there's been talk that Justin Jefferson was like the perfect fit for New Orleans, and that's not even going to potentially even be a thing, it seems, anymore.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting fit for them, just from the standpoint that, he's from LSU and he could pair up now with Emmanuel Sanders, our boy, and Michael Thomas out there, and finally give Drew Brees a competent receiving core, which he hasn't had since the days of, Marquez Colston and those boys out there roaming around. I don't understand why that is. Why they don't give Drew Brees the best possible receiving core. It seems like they make him make, chicken salad a lot of times. But I'm interested to see what they do because there's rumors that the Saints are definitely going to be a team that's going to trade up. But if they're staying put here with this pick, gosh, I don't really have an answer for him. But I'm going to go ahead with this pick, and I'm going to take one of my guys for them. I'm going to take Jeff Gladney, the cornerback from TCU. They re-signed Janoris Jenkins this offseason for probably more money than he's actually, worth. And I'd love to get a wide receiver here that I think could actually come in and do what they need him to do right away, like Jefferson. But with Jeff Gladney, you're getting a physical guy who can play inside, outside. One of the coolest notes about Jeff Gladney from Dane Brugler is that he has more passes defensed in college than he does games played, which is pretty cool. And he played a lot of games. He played 40 games. So do the math on that one. He gets after the ball a lot. And for the Saints to add him to the secondary, I think would be really nice right here.
Seems like a good fit too because they lost Eli Apple. In the last few years, they have Marshawn Lattimore. So now you have a secondary now between with those two corners that they have the opportunity to be something special with that secondary. And the Saints defense has been something nice in the last few seasons, and really ever since they've gotten Marshawn Lattimore.
All right. So I have the Vikings' second first-round pick. As everyone was talking, I was like thinking like different scenarios they can go. I even thought of the scenario, especially with how this board has been falling. This would be a crazy thought, like if all these wide receivers are falling, could Denver come back into the first round and trade the Vikings and try to grab one of the wide receivers that are left? But I felt that it was a little too soon to do that because of what is out there. So I'm going to have the Vikings stay put, and they were able to address the wide receiver position with Denzel Mims. And so with their second first-round pick at pick number 25, I have the Minnesota Vikings selecting Trevon Diggs, the cornerback from Alabama.
He's another really good one. Diggs is another. Replace Diggs with another Diggs.
Yep.
But he's another good one. Now, granted, I will say that I'm probably a little bit more high on Gladney than I am on Diggs, and I was telling Maddie yesterday that I actually am a little bit more high on Amik Robertson than I am Trevon Diggs. Kind of a hot take right there, but I love the idea to replace Diggs with Diggs.
Dude, you just slam Ty's first round pick with a guy who has a third round, pretty much universal grade.
And that's like
Ty, respond. Retaliate, Ty.
I don't know if I can. It's just basically just looking at this board and wow. Oh yes, Amik Robertson would be good. It seems like because he plays like in a small school, so he doesn't have that wide of like that big competition that he's dealt with. Whereas Trevon Diggs has had experience, especially going up against the SEC players. Like you've got Justin Jefferson, you've got Henry Ruggs, you've got Jerry Jeudy. Well, Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs were on the same team, but imagine having to go against those guys in practice, possibly. When it comes to competition, Diggs made a little bit more sense than Robertson. Now, had the Vikings went through and traded back with the Broncos, then I could definitely see the Vikings going to get Robertson in the second round. So now we move to the Dolphins' final first-round pick of the 2020 draft.
So they have addressed offense in their first 2 picks, they got the quarterback, they got a good tackle. I was considering keeping the flow with offense and going to receiver, but I think they need to address defense at this point. They have kind of solidified their corner position, but they're still kind of needing some defensive help in kind of all areas outside of corner. So with the 26th overall pick, the Dolphins are going to take Kenneth Murray, linebacker. Sorry, man.
I think someone wanted the pick.
I was thinking of going like Grant Delpit for them, but
Okay.
I didn't.
I mean, it's a fit.
Yeah.
Kind of got tremendous upside. His sideline to sideline range is insane. He will be able to go to Miami. I think it's a good match for them.
Shelby, I really thought I was going to be able to grab all 4 players I wanted to grab at each team, and you just ruined it. I was so freaking close. I have the Ravens. Whatever. All right, great pick. I agree. Let's pick someone else.
So that was a great pick for the Dolphins. Being a Sooners homer, this guy, high character guy, you're not going to find a higher character guy in this draft. Maybe Austin Jackson could give him a run for his money, but very high character guy, very high IQ guy. He was able to diagnose plays really quickly. He's a specimen. He's going to be a load to block wherever he goes on the field. And think about that division. The team that I think is the favorite right now, as crazy as this sounds, is the Buffalo Bills in that division. It's weird, right? You grit your teeth saying it, but I think it's true. You got to deal with Allen and his speed and his size. Well, you can let Murray just spy him all game and force Allen to be accurate and beat you with his arm. That's a pretty good formula for the Dolphins, at least in 2 games there. And Murray is a 3-down linebacker, so he's not going to have to come off the field on 3rd down. So I think it's a great pick for the Dolphins. They got their captain on offense in Tua Tagovailoa. I think I said that correctly. I'm not going to say it 10 times fast. And then they got the captain for their defense in Kenneth Murray, who was the captain pretty much right away for the Oklahoma Sooners defense. So very, very solid pick for the Dolphins there.
Yeah, I love the Kenneth Murray pick. He actually reminds me quite favorably to a former Cornhusker, which is Levante David. A guy that can run sideline to sideline, be a 3-down linebacker, and we know that Levante David's probably one of the more underrated and probably underappreciated linebackers in the NFL. And I think Kenneth Murray can get the job done. He's a guy he's a high instinctual guy, high IQ, and just a really good dude on and off the field. And you add a lot of character in that locker room for the Miami Dolphins. And frankly, they have addressed high character even with these selections, with Tua, Andrew Thomas, and now Kenneth Murray. You could not have scripted a better 1st round haul with the amount of draft capital that they've had with those first 3 picks in their 1st round.
Yeah, the Dolphins are going to be one of the easier teams to predict in any draft as long as Brian Flores is their head coach and he's the one making the calls. It's the Patriot way, and always going after high character players from schools where those Patriots guys have long had connections. And I think that obviously Murray is a great fit. I mean, imagine going up against Murray and Kyle Van Noy on 3rd down. Like, I don't know what you do with that. I mean, that's 2 really athletic guys at the linebacker position, and Flores, obviously a linebacker himself and a specialist at the linebacker position. You get him the guys that he wants out there with versatility, the Patriot way, once again, and you combine it with the team captains thing. I mean, Christian Wilkins, their first rounder last year, another team captain at Clemson on those great defenses for the Tigers. And so absolutely they fit the same mold that Denver looks for in terms of team captain guys, good character guys, always reliable, does their job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think with those 3 picks that they've made, those are all no-brainers for what the Dolphins are trying to do in terms of building a franchise full of guys who are reliable, who do their job, and who are team captain types.
All right, Seattle, what are you going to do here at 27?
So Jadeveon Clowney is still not signed. That's still not figured out. The Seahawks have got to get somebody on the edge, especially in that division. And they just so happen to have one fall. I thought that we were going to get Chase on to slip to us at 27, but it didn't happen. Right now, we will take Yetur Gross-Matos, the defensive end or edge out of Penn State.
I see. You just don't want to take an Iowa player with 2 Iowa guys in here right now. I see how it is.
I honestly thought, I thought Epineza would be a good fit with Seattle. I think he would be a great scheme fit, but I mean, if you want a more like a wide 9 pass rusher that can go on the outside of the tackle, then you probably want Yetur Gross-Matos over AJ Epineza.
He's probably the best name in the draft, by the way.
Yetur Gross-Matos?
Yeah.
All right.
I think DeAndre Swift, for a guy who's gonna tote the rock a lot, I think that's a pretty dope name too.
I don't know. Hard to beat Gross-Matos.
So I'm up on the clock and I'm going to go to bed after this because I got to get up at 4 a.m. But
boy.
The Ravens are on the clock and I could take AJ Epineza here, but they do have a hole in the interior offensive line. I'm going Cesar Ruiz from Michigan. I think Epineza would be a good fit, but right now he's not a true need at this point with Derek Wolfe and Calais Campbell on the outside or on the edge positions. So Cesar Ruiz will be a good spot. I believe their center right now is injured last year. If he comes back, he'll be fine. But they also have a hole at guard with Marshall Yonda. So either way, they have at least a replacement for someone in the interior.
Good stuff, Andrew.
Yep. All right. Good night, y'all. I got to drop off. Peace.
Good night.
All right, Graham, what are the Titans going to do?
All right, so I'm going to go Jalen Johnson because they lost Logan Ryan to free agency, and it doesn't seem like they're going to be bringing him back. So
it's another good fit. I could even see them, there's even some talk that they might sign Clowney. So maybe they sign an edge rusher, but they could even also go offensive line with losing Jack Conklin. So I think that that would be another pretty good pick. But you really can't go wrong with Jalen Johnson.
A guy has skyrocketed up draft boards as of late.
4.5 speed, I think.
Yeah. Well, I would say for Green Bay's sake, since Green Bay is on the clock, they probably, with the amount of wide receivers that have been taken in the first round, they probably would consider trading up at this particular point to see if they could go get a guy like a Denzel Mims or a Justin Jefferson a little ahead, and or a little, should we say, into the early 20s. But, the fact that you can potentially even still get a top flight wide receiver, in the first round and get a guy like a Brandon Ayuk, I would say is a pretty good fit. But that's not the selection, surprisingly. That's not the selection. I'm going to take a risk and do something that would probably make Green Bay a little bit mad, their fan base. And I'm going to take Isaiah Wilson. I'm going to take Isaiah Wilson, the offensive tackle from Georgia. They lost they lost Brian Bulaga. They'll need still a little bit of a hole there on that offensive line. So I can see that if they don't go wide receiver, and with everything that certainly had unfolded, I can see them going with an offensive lineman here. And as such, the likes of an Isaiah Wilson, who is also skyrocketed up draft boards.
Say, I'm really surprised that you didn't have the Packers going for either Josh Jones or Austin Jackson at this spot.
Mm-hmm. No, I just really kind of I do really like Isaiah Wilson, but I just I think that for Green Bay they also probably would be wise to even protect Aaron Rodgers at this particular point too in his career, given his age, and we all know certainly that they would love to have a wide receiver. So my guess is they would be either offensive lineman or Brandon Ayuk at this particular scenario.
'49ers are up for the second time. Travis, where do you think they go here?
The 49ers, I think, have one of the more complete rosters in the league. So I don't see a lot of holes here. They did have their eye on a cornerback, and they were going to take Jalen Johnson here. The Titans blew that for them. So I think this is a pick that's likely. There's a good chance you'll see this pick get traded. But I think for the sake of this mock draft, we're going to go ahead and stay here. And they'll just try to fill the hole that was created when DeForest Buckner left. So they're going to take Ross Blacklock, defensive tackle out of TCU.
Something about those TCU players. They're really good this year.
Oh, yeah.
Well, somebody told me they don't play any defense in the Big 12, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I heard that quite a bit too.
Well, sometimes you need a little bit more Gallimore.
The Big 12 is just one big 7-on-7 skelly, and that's how they get it done there. That's how you have two straight Heisman winners coming out of the same team.
I just call the Big 12 the Arena Football League. That's not the Arena Football League.
Right. Oh man.
Where are you gonna go?
I since I get the great privilege of picking for the Kansas City Chiefs, I want to take the first specialist off the board. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, when I pick for rival teams in my mock drafts, I try to think in terms of like what would I hate as a Broncos fan.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
And
Here it comes.
yeah,
Don't
this
you do
is
it.
the pick
Don't you
that I
do
would
it.
absolutely hate the most.
Don't you do it.
Kansas City. Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU.
Oh!
So imagine this. Imagine you're the Kansas City Chiefs and you already have the MVP Patrick Mahomes. You already have the best crew of receivers and tight ends in the game. And now you add the guy who was number one in broken tackles in college football last year, the best pass catching running back in the entire draft to the mix. Screw the defense. Who cares? It doesn't matter. The Chiefs are going to beat people by scoring 100 points a game, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire fits Andy Reid's offense probably a little too perfectly. There's no way he's getting past. If it's me as the GM, there's no way he's getting past this pick just in terms of the pure dominance that you could see happening with this offensive core together for the foreseeable future. So Edwards-Helaire, he went from kind of that third-round potential sleeper guy to – dang, like he's kind of the ideal fit for everything that NFL teams want to do, and he breaks a lot of tackles. So Kansas City, welcome back to having a running back who can win on the inside, who can catch passes. Not that Thompson can't do that, but man, Kareem Hunt was such a special talent for them. And when they lost him, he definitely left a void behind. And so I think Edwards-Helaire or a guy like DeAndre Swift right here makes a lot of sense for the Chiefs. If there's that big of a run on cornerbacks in the first round, there's no way you pass up on an opportunity to get a stud running back like this to put with Patrick Mahomes. So you hate to see it.
So I got to ask my man, because, there's obviously been, some talk, obviously, with DeAndre Swift being the number one back. So why CEH over DeAndre Swift, or let alone the guy that you and I have seen run over our teams? More in particular, me, But I mean, and a guy like a Jonathan Taylor or J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, that's a good question. It could be any of those guys, honestly. I think to me, it just comes purely down to, I think Edwards-Helaire is going to be the guy that instantly translates to the NFL as the best. He can pass protect. He can catch out of the backfield. Like I said, number one in college football and broken tackles this last year. And so if you put those skills together in the Chiefs offense, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, Jonathan Taylor, to me, not a very good pass catching back at this point. J.K. Dobbins, pretty good. But also, if I'm taking J.K. Dobbins and Edwards-Helaire in the same conversation, I have to think like, okay, which one is great at what? And I think Edwards-Helaire is truly great as a pass catcher. I mean, you could honestly split him out as a slot in his rookie season. He's that good as a receiver. So that's what it comes down to for me. You put a 3-down guy like that on the Chiefs offense right now, which they already have so many weapons. I think his lack of true elite athleticism is made up for by the fact that he's just so good at his job and everything that he does, that he brings to the table that element that they've been missing a little bit, even with Thompson playing well. So,
And to make a point there, the Kansas City Chiefs, and rightfully so, threw the ball more on first down than any other team in football. They threw the ball 70% of the time on first down. So, I mean, having Edwards-Helaire in there is going to fit perfectly because, okay, we're on first down. Well, what do we need to do if everything else breaks down? I just dump it off to Edwards-Helaire and he picks up 6 or 7 yards. And it's like a traditional running play that pops off and you're ahead of schedule.
Right.
So Edwards-Helaire, him being in there is not really going to cue you off for what the play is because he can still run the ball, obviously. But he fits perfectly, especially if they're going to continue to be that aggressive on first down and trying to get ahead of the sticks. So I think it's a perfect fit, and I hate to see it, honestly. I think how do we check him, right? Like we gotta spy Mahomes because he can beat you with his legs. You got to play that speed with somebody back. We just got Henderson, which is great, like cool. But how do we deal with Edwards-Helaire, one-on-one against a linebacker? We're going to have Todd Davis out there guarding Edwards-Helaire?
Yeah, nails on a chalkboard right there.
Oh, sorry. I'm just saying. Like that sucks. That's a matchup nightmare for us. Oh, and they still got this Kelsey guy who can kill us too. So whatever.
And Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
all right. So who's starting in the second round? No, I'm just kidding.
With the 33rd pick.
Oh, I guess that would be, if we were doing second round, that would be me that would be up then. So, but wouldn't even know where they would go here, honestly.
They would. I mean, they would probably go like a Josh Jones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would go
Austin Jackson.
Right.
Yeah. So the guys that are left, we've got Xavier McKinney.
Well,
still on the board.
I have a wild card for Cincinnati in this one. If they did, Jalen Reagor for Cincinnati.
Yep.
For Cincinnati. I think that he would be one, because now you give Joe Burrow a guy that, and this is going to sound crazy, because I really like Henry Ruggs' ceiling as far as a guy that is probably a better version of Deshaun Jackson. But if you were to tell me what's an ideal player that fits the mold of a guy that maybe is a Tyreek Hill type, it's probably Jalen Reagor. And I think his game speed is way better than what his NFL combine was. So you get a guy that's physical, He can go up and get a football. He was victim of really bad quarterback play. I mean, you get a guy like that with Joe Burrow. Oof. And then you go along with that with John Ross. Oof. Be kind of a tough offense to go right into.
So let me ask you guys, because we have it out there. You've seen the draft. Who do you think was the steal of the first round? Non-bias.
In whose mock?
Well, in the mock we just did. Yeah, the mock we just did. I'll go first. I think Miami at 18 getting Thomas, getting a franchise left tackle to protect Tua that late. I think that's the steal of the first round.
I will say the winners of the draft is unquestionably Miami. That's the winner of the draft is unquestionably Miami. And then I will say that San Francisco is probably close. And even for just the one pick that they made, Kansas City is a huge winner of this draft for getting Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So those are probably my three teams. I would say Miami, Kansas City, and San Francisco.
Yeah, it's a tough question. You could look at Kinlaw at 14 as being a steal. I mean, it all depends on what your board looks like, because I think this is kind of a soapbox, but like I think these mock draft simulators have kind of spoiled like what is going to be perceived as a reach and what's going to be perceived as a steal in the eyes of NFL draft fans. And these tools are amazing for all of us to be able to utilize and go through scenarios and stuff. But like we've had specific players slotted in very specific spots for a couple of months now. So if a player like Jalen Reagor, who has first round talent, actually goes in the first round, you're going to have people in the draft community saying, well, that's a big time reach. He's a second round guy, or, you know, such and such a player is a steal because he was rated as a high first round pick by these mock draft outlets. And it's like, that's not necessarily the case with these NFL teams. Like to me, the biggest steal of the draft maybe hasn't even been picked yet. AJ Epinesa. Like, and I say that as a full true-blooded Iowa Hawkeyes homer, but AJ Epinesa is a game wrecker off the edge. You know, he affected so many games at Iowa in 3 years, and 2 of them not even as a full-time starter. So for him to still be sitting on the board past number 32, that's crazy. And he, to me, was a guy that you could have seen as a top 10 player. I think that if you're looking at this top 32 of who was a steal, you know, you have to look at the beauties in the eye of the beholder. You know, like a pick at 29, like Jalen Johnson, he could easily go to Minnesota at 22. He could easily go to Jacksonville at 20, or the Raiders at 19. But for him to go at 29, like a lot of people would say, oh, well, Jalen Johnson is projected second round. That's a little bit of a reach, but who's he really projected to the second round by? You get what I'm saying? So I think it's all in the eye of the beholder and where you view these players personally after watching them. And so I think, to me, I would agree, Andrew Thomas at 18, the clear-cut steal of this first round as a top 10 number 1 left tackle type of prospect falling that far.
Well, and I think as far as you talking about AJ Epinesa, you know, Sarah, there was so much talk after his sophomore season, you know, like when he was not even a starter, like he was better than Chase Young. Like there was some talk like he was way better than Chase Young, and then Chase Young entered the mix, and then it was just like, okay, well, Chase Young is the clear cut, you know, unequivocally best defensive player available and best defensive player of this draft. Well, now you have AJ Epinesa, who probably in a certain extent has had inconsistent issues. Is that fair? I mean, you know, but at the same time, you turn the tape on, he's a guy that's going to be productive. He's a guy that, you know, I kind of compared him a little bit to a Jadeveon Clowney in that regard, just how kind of a physical specimen he is when he gets to a quarterback. So I just think that, you know, he's a true first-round talent. And it's unfortunate that he did have a really bad NFL combine. but again, it goes back to a lot of things that had come out. I believe it was in April, the first part of April, but where we were hearing that the board that we think is there is going to be completely different to a lot of other NFL teams. So we may be seeing, a lot of potential reaches or just potential teams that value a certain player way more than potentially we thought coming in based off of mock draft season.
There's a lot of talent still out there too in the second round. So I think honestly, in a lot of drafts, you'd hear people say, well, they're about 19 to 20 legitimately first round picks, like first round talents, right? This year, I mean, Del Pitt at 35 overall, Zach Bond, right? Ezra Cleveland has had a lot of steam lately. He could sneak into the back end of the first round.
Maybe even middle of the first.
Jeremy Chin, who I love, who I think is a playmaker, maybe he gets in somewhere in the late 20s and the early 30s. So, I mean, there's a lot of talent in this thing. And it looks like really the meat of this draft is, it's not just top heavy. It looks like the second and third round are where a lot of championship teams are going to be built.
And honestly, I will say this for Denver's sake, and with this particular mock draft, I would say you're feeling pretty good still. You probably were panicking a little bit with the 15th overall selection and not going wide receiver. But, the fact that there is so much talent still there. And frankly, with Jalen Reagor still there, I think that could potentially open the door that we won't do the second round. But, I mean, in this particular scenario, I could see Denver moving up into the second round and maybe even accumulating 2 second-round picks, and getting a guy like a Jalen Reagor, because obviously they didn't go wide receiver in the first round. They went C.J. Henderson. So they could probably go out and get, I don't think Brandon Ayuk, he was going to be taken by Green Bay. But, I mean, Brandon Ayuk wasn't even taken. So, I mean,
T. Higgins also
even
available.
T. Higgins. I mean, just that there's these wide receivers that are still there. Donovan People-Jones might even slide into the second round. So there's still people available, wide receivers that are be available for Denver if they wanted to go into that regard. But Jalen Reagor is probably the cream of the crop in that regard with that second round. So if Denver wanted to do that, they would probably be advised to trade up in that second round.
So, Cameron, with that being said, which team do you believe, like in the second round, Denver could look at if this was the way the board fell? They go contact teams like, hey, we want to trade up with you guys. Which team do you think would be suitable for in which area basically would they pick?
I got an answer for this.
Well,
It's not in the second round. It's 31 with San Francisco. If there's a guy we want to move back up and get, San Francisco has I think they have 0 picks from the end of the first round to the 5th round. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but there's a huge hole for them in their draft capital. I think that the 31st pick is right for the taking. And if the Broncos find a receiver or have a receiver that they like, that's their first trade partner, especially knowing the relationship with Lynch that we have. I think that's probably where we will go first. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's just where I think.
No, you're actually right, because if after those 2 first-round picks, they actually do not have another pick until round 5, 157 overall. So that'd be interesting if they did decide to trade with San Francisco at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking like what Mike Cliff has suggested of the Broncos maybe going after a second round pick, always look for teams that have multiple, and just like you talk about with San Francisco with their first round pick kind of being more of a surplus than a necessity at this point. I think in the second round, you look at teams like Chicago, Indianapolis, Baltimore, the LA Rams, all of those teams have multiple second round picks. And so, and especially if they don't have a third round pick, that's a team that you can say, okay, we'll give you 2 third round picks for your second round pick. and you give us maybe throw us back like a fourth or a fifth and even it out or whatever. But that's where I think you find those types of deals to say, okay, like you said, Maddie, the meat of this draft might be on day 2. And if you load up on, the Broncos are on a hot streak of second round picks right now. The last 3 second round picks are Locke, Reisner, and Cortland Sutton. So if that's the sweet spot and you can get multiple second round picks, especially if they're in the top 50, I say you look at making that happen. And my favorite trade on the mock draft machine and on the trade value chart is, I think it's 77 and 95 for 50. I don't know if the Bears go for that, but that's a sweet spot and gives you 2 picks within a 4-pick span to say, okay, we got 46 and we got 50, and then we've got 83 later. That to me is way better than just having 46, 77, 83, and 95. I'd much rather trade those 2 picks. And if you're Chicago, that's solid because it gives you that opportunity to be more flexible on day 2 than you were before. But again, it takes 2. So you just have to look at those teams that have multiple assets in a specific round, and those are usually the most willing teams to get out of those spots.
Yeah, I guess for me, one of the things too, because one of the things we don't talk about, and because Vic Fangio said that he wants 6 defensive backs, is it possible, because we talked about doubling up on wide receiver, is it possible that they even double up on corner? I mean, they took, in this mock draft, they took C.J. Henderson, and I'm not going to say his name or his last name, but you could draft the Noah guy from Auburn, potentially.
Igbinogany.
Right. As far as one of those guys that's just a true playmaker and athletic freak, a guy that, we say potential, and we use that word reach, but because of his pure athleticism, he might slide into the first. And because of his talent, he might be, based off talent, a first round talent. So for the Broncos' sake, do you double up on corner?
Heck yeah. Double up. That's my favorite thing to do in the draft. Make a strength stronger. I don't understand why more teams don't do it. To me, it's a no-brainer. And that's where I'm at with the wide receiver thing. Like, take 2 wide receivers with your first 3 picks. Because right now, what do we have? Like, we have the sentimental value of Tim Patrick and Deshaun Hamilton, and that's it. Like, we have sentimental value. We don't have playmakers of the caliber of what Kansas City has, or what, the top offenses in the league, you name it. They have top tier playmakers. And I'm not saying, just go kill it with fire, but this is the draft to do it. Like, this wide receiver class is ridiculous. And you're talking about having guys like Chenault and Michael Pittman Jr. and Brandon Ayuk and Jalen Reagor and T. Higgins all available in round 2. Like, think about pairing those guys, one of those guys, up with any one of, Judy, Lamb, Ruggs, Jefferson, any of those players. Think about pairing those guys up and think about the possibilities with Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant on the field at the same time. That's the kind of, we're going to have to score points in order to win games. Like, I think that goes without saying, and it sounds so stupid to say it out loud, but like, the Broncos have struggled badly to score points until Drew Lock came onto the scene. And so just imagine what he can do with weapons. I mean, those 4 victories that he had last year, 26 points per game in those 4 wins. And that's with, the back end of your roster, practice squad players out there at the end of the season. So to me, if you get him true elite playmakers, like, I love the idea of Ruggs and Reagor. That was the first idea that I had with this. If you get Ruggs and Reagor and you get the 2 fastest dudes at the receiver position in this draft to put with Sutton and Fant in the passing game, like, that would be insane. That would be fun to watch. And it would give the Broncos some explosive ability that they just haven't had since, Emmanuel Sanders in 2014 and 15.
Well, and I think too, and I'm necessarily maybe not the biggest fan of doubling up as far as positions. I mean, I'm fine with doubling up, like say like a few rounds later, but as far as going pick by pick, like first round, second round, this is the year. I mean, this is the year to do it. If you want to think about actually doing it, whether it's corner or wide receiver, this is the year to do it. And for wide receiver's sake, the most logical double up scenario, and maybe for this particular scenario, is probably getting Rager as your first wide receiver. But you could go up and get Rager in your second round, and then if it lucks out that way, in the third round, getting Laviska Shenault. I mean, in the potential third round. I mean, that's a fun combination. Just based off injury history, because you're talking about a guy that is a pure potential top 10 talent as a wide receiver with Laviska Shenault, and you're looking at a guy that could potentially be there in the third round. That's almost a no-brainer.
I'm going to go on record and say that Shenault doesn't go in the second. Like, he doesn't go any earlier than the third. In other years where teams could get him in the building and could check out his medicals firsthand, like, that might be different. But with this, I think that teams are going to they say that this is the one to just try to hit it in the fairway, right? That this is the draft. You just want to keep the ball in play. You don't want to take any really big chances when you don't have to. And Shenault in the second round, with all that other talent that's around him in that same tier, that's going to seem like a reach. So I honestly could see Shenault sliding into the third. Mm-hmm. And if the Broncos trade back into the second round they have 3 third-round picks. So if they package those together to move back into the second round again, then to get him, I don't think that's too much of a reach. But I really don't see his value being in the second round for how the current situation lies in the league. But he's definitely an interesting prospect, and it's kind of crazy to think we were in like October looking at mock drafts in October, November timeframe, and he was slotted in the middle of the first round.
Yeah.
Like between like 10 and 16 pretty universally. So it's pretty crazy to think that we can get a guy like that potentially in the third round.
It would be great. That's one of my favorite scenarios for us, and it's one big reason why I would be against trading up in round 1, because you have the opportunity to use a third round pick like that, but at the same time, it is a bit of a wild card as compared to guys who have proven they can stay healthy. But I mean, just think about that. If you keep all 5 of those picks and somehow you get Shenault in the third after getting a guy like Ruggs in the first round, and then you can do whatever else with those other 3 top 100 picks, that to me is very exciting. It becomes a little bit tougher to pull off if you're not keeping all those picks. But I have another question for you all based on this first round. Who's getting Trevor Lawrence in 2021?
Well, we all thought it might have been the Patriots, right? Because, but the Patriots
that'd have been our luck.
They got Jordan Love.
I think it's the Jaguars.
Yeah, maybe Jaguars. Maybe Washington.
After they lose faith in Simba.
Well, I mean, there's all these rumblings, that he may not be wanted in Washington. So if they have the same overall pick, if they have this, maybe a 2, maybe a first overall pick, how do you pass on Trevor Lawrence?
You take Justin Fields.
You take Adrian Martinez. That's the right answer.
The Heisman hopeful.
Yeah, the guy that expectations were high and. Yeah, no.
So, yeah.
But I mean, I would say Washington, maybe Carolina. I would say Carolina if they didn't sign Teddy Bridgewater.
I'm going to throw a wild card out there for you. The Detroit Lions. Because we don't know what Matt Stafford's going to do this year. And we don't know because he is coming up on that double-digit amount of years he's been in the league. So, especially with Detroit not winning as many games, being always in the top 10 these past few years, I could see a situation where after the 2020 season, if we have a 2020 season, that Matt Stafford just hangs it up, and that's where
I will say this, based off of this mock draft, it's not Miami, but with the amount of draft capital that they have, and let's just say they don't move up, but let's just say that they don't go quarterback with their first in the pick in the top 5, then yeah, Trevor Lawrence is really, really, really high on Miami's board for come next year. And so I would put Miami in that discussion.
I think that if New England does not go Jordan Love in this draft like we had mocked, then I think it's 1,000% New England, because that's just going to be the best of everybody else in the NFL that they tank and then get him and are good again.
And then we got to put up with Belichick for another 15 years.
You know, and I kind of have a wild card in the 20s. Dallas.
Oh,
You think
I
they
don't
get
know-
that bad?
I don't know. I don't know if they'll come to an agreement with Dak, but if they don't,
They gotta suck first.
I know.
Number
Yeah.
one. Object number
Look.
one of this game is to be terrible. Terrible in 2020.
I can go play quarterback for them behind that offensive line and hand the ball to number 21 and get it to Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. And we'll be at least better than the Redskins. I'm just saying.
What
Yeah.
about New Orleans?
They're going to be really good, though. New Orleans is going to be like in the high 20s to 30s for their pick.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be a team that's got to suck, I think.
That one's the interesting one, with Drew Brees potentially leaving and with them putting a first round tender on Taysom Hill, and so yeah. I could see New Orleans going in second round though and getting a guy like a Jacob Eason or a Jake Fromm.
Could happen.
Oh, Fromm.
He's on QB1. He's the man. I'm gonna throw us into that mix and just stir the pot a little bit. And I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second here. Okay. We have a quarterback who's in his first year starting. Our current group of wide receivers are terrible outside of Sutton. What happens if the offensive line is a question mark again, like Maddie's been talking about? And what happens if any one of our top cornerbacks gets injured? That secondary is going to be in a lot of trouble. I'm just playing pessimist for a second here because I never get to play this role because I'm always, 16-0 until we ain't. And soon 17-0 until we ain't. But I'm just saying, like, if things don't go right for Denver, there exists a possible scenario where we're the worst team in the NFL next year. I personally don't think it's going to happen, but if things go, according to the way that other fan bases want it to happen for us, and Drew Lock is not who we thought he is, and the offensive line struggles again, and we have injuries all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
And if we do have that number one pick, it better be Trevor Lawrence. That's all I'm saying. Like, that's the guy, number one next year. Whoever has that pick, unless it's unless Joe Burrow has a season-ending injury or whatever, it's got to be Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion. So interesting to think about. I think you're right, though. Jacksonville, Carolina, probably the two obvious candidates at this point. I'm not high on Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know how you guys feel about Teddy, but a couple years ago he was interesting to me. Now it's just kind of like, okay, like he was okay for the Saints, but they're a really great team. Now he's an absolutely terrible team. So it'll be interesting, but I think Panthers are up there as contenders.
I guess the wild card 2 team that wasn't thrown out there, and I would hate to do it, the Raiders. I would hate to do it, but the Raiders. Because how much faith do the Raiders front office, truly have in Derek Carr? And I think that that will be the true testament. Obviously, based off of this particular draft, they believe in Carr.
Well, the
But-
wild card here is they just signed Mariota. And I think that Gruden thinks he might be able to unlock Mariota in a way that Tennessee wasn't.
define unlock.
Be able to actually get him to play to his strengths. Because if you look at that Titans offense, it's not like there was a lot to work with as far as the quarterback goes.
Well,
Tight ends were banged up. Yeah, Brown showed up, but Corey Davis has been a bust. They took him 5 overall. They have Tajay Sharp didn't come to fruition the way they wanted. I think that Gruden thinks that he could get the most out of Marcus Mariota. I think he's had a crush on him since he was at Oregon. I think he's really excited about it. And honestly, I could see him, being a West Coast guy, playing at Oregon. I could see him winning over that fan base in Las Vegas pretty quickly once Derek Carr goes and takes his noodle arm out there. So I really think that I'm going to make a bold statement and say Mariota is the starting quarterback for the Oakland Raiders to start the 2021 season.
that's bold.
I think that's cool.
In like bold black letters. I guess
Man.
and one would be Tampa, with Brady.
Mm. Man, Jacksonville is so booty. Like their team sucks. They
Bad.
have holes inside of holes all over that team. And all of the star players want to go.
Yep, you're right on. They're terrible. They just, unless Minshew is the second coming of, Doug Flutie or something crazy. I don't know. I just don't. Jacksonville's trading all their good players. They're about to trade another one this week. And as
Ngakoue, yeah.
it's not going to be
Two of
easy
them,
for them
actually.
to just draft guys to replace it. So, like with Judy coming in at 9 in our mock draft, Judy would be nice for them, but their defense, how many defenders on Jacksonville's roster can you name right now? In all honesty, you know what I'm saying? So when it gets
Miles Jack, that's it.
yeah, Miles Jack, and they just signed
Have a-
Schobert, so that's it. I don't know. I don't even know anybody else on their roster right now that you could point to and say, oh yeah, that's a game-changing player. They're so bad, and it's clear that they're tanking for Lawrence. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were willing to trade Ngakoue for a future first-round pick, just so they can position themselves better to get him to get Lawrence next year. But yeah, they're really bad. They're going to be tough to beat out for that number 1 pick, I think.
Yeah, and I think it for Jacksonville, you have to do something, and you also have to have players that believe in the team. The last handful of players have been pretty outspoken as far as wanting to be there, and it really started from Jalen Ramsey. They traded Jalen Ramsey, they traded Calais Campbell, they traded. They're going to be trading Yannick Ngakoue. And obviously they'll be looking at trading Leonard Fournette now. So that's 4 potential players that will have found new homes. I also want to talk. I want to pose a question because this is something I was listening to SiriusXM. Do the Chiefs do the unthinkable? And do they trade Chris Jones? Because their draft picks are rather low. So do they trade Chris Jones to, say, Jacksonville?
For pick 19
Mm-hmm.
or
Or-
20? Excuse me, 20? Maybe. It's interesting. It's a bad move for Jacksonville though, because they're not really in win now mode. They're kind of in rebuild mode, and they're still going to have to pay the guy. That's a weird move for them. So, like I always say, you have to have a willing trade partner to give you a high compensation. Like DeForest Buckner netted the 13th overall pick. and then the Colts had to trade the 13th pick just to have the privilege of paying him, right? So it's twofold. It's compensation times 2 coming from that team. Is he worth it? Absolutely. He's a stud. I would have wanted him to be the number 1 target for the Broncos if he saw free agency. But I just don't know, especially at this juncture where there's so much money already tied up for these teams, where that trade partner would go. I think the most likely scenario is that he plays out another year in Kansas City, and then he hits the open market next year. And he plays under the franchise tender, and then they go from there. But I'll make another bold statement going back to Jacksonville real quick, and I don't want to drag this on too long, but if they don't get Trevor Lawrence in the next year's draft, I think that there will be plans already accepted for them to move out of Jacksonville within the next 3 years. They have very few marketable players as it is. It's a far cry from 2017 when they made the AFC Championship game, where Miles Jack wasn't down, by the way. He should have scored that touchdown. It should have been Jacksonville in the Super Bowl. But yeah, it's been all downhill since then. And there's not a lot that the fan base is actually excited about. You're getting ready to go trade Fournette, who was arguably the second most liked player on that team behind Jalen Ramsey. There's not really much to sell on that fan base. And they already don't turn out for games in an arena where you can go swimming while watching the football game. So I don't know what else they could possibly do to get butts and seats.
Well, then let me kind of pose a little bit of a hypothetical then. Obviously, we say tank for Lawrence, right? And we talk about medicals with Chenault. Hypothetical. What if the Miami Dolphins did pass on Tua? And you're Jacksonville, you're sitting there at 9, and you want to reinvigorate your fan base. I mean,
It's a move.
That'd be pretty hard to pass up, given Minshew mania and everything. At least my opinion, and just me being a little bit high on Tua Tagovailoa. But that would be really hard for me to pass up if you're Jacksonville and Tua fell into your lap. Now, granted, I think that if Miami didn't take him, there's probably a decent chance that you'll have teams calling up and calling for services to trade up to get to him. But, I mean,
it's an interesting thought. All right, guys. Do you guys want to wrap this thing up?
yes.
Yeah.
Final thoughts? Is there somebody you still have a crush on who's left in the draft right now on this board for the Broncos?
Jalen Reagor.
Brandon Ayuk.
Yep, both of those guys for sure. Gosh, that would be a kind of a dream scenario to come away with one of those 2 guys plus Henderson. It's kind of the inverse of what I think will happen, but man, if you come away with CJ and one of Reagor or Ayuk, like that would be top notch for me.
Shelby?
I like Jalen Reagor for Denver. If we get the opportunity, I think we should take him. If we don't get a wide receiver in the first round.
I'm sticking with Chin. I think he's a incredible talent. I think that Fangio could be creative. I think Donatel would be able to put him in the right position to succeed. I just like his flexibility, his versatility. He could be an answer to a lot of our problems on defense. And basically you can fit him and Kareem Jackson wherever there's a need. So I like that too. I'm not going to hate on wide receiver, obviously, here, especially if we got Henderson in the first round. I think Reagor's a stud. Obviously, being a Big 12 guy, I like him. But I planted my flag on Chin, and I'm sticking to it. So
Chinny chin.
I'll take it on the chin if I'm wrong.
All right. Well, it was nice for all of you to join in and be able to once again do a first round mock. Hopefully, it'll be interesting if this board falls the way it does, but I think given the situation, especially in Denver, if this is how the board falls, I'll be okay with the corner, but
It'll be a
not
tough
just
pill to
just
swallow.
just not just not getting one of those 3 wideouts.
It'll be a tough pill to swallow. But I think it would just depend on if we did get a receiver in the first, but it would be a tough pill to swallow.
Right. And with that, we plan to write up these picks and we'll have it up this week before the draft. So with everyone here from Predominantly Orange, we are signing out. Later Broncos country.
You see ya.